Welcome again to Puddle of Porridge, and if you joined us last time, we discussed our Minion Master Training Wheels build. This basically was a Minion Master build that was very user-friendly, very beginner-friendly, and we're going to build on our build from last time. So if you've not watched that, the link will be down below or in my channel. You can check it out at your leisure, but please watch that before watching this one. In this video, we are specifically going to be talking about a Minion Master build variant. We're going to have my very brief take on what is necessary to run what is called a Minion Master Bomber build, which is going to take full advantage of the Death Nova ability. We are also going to be taking that build a step further by using an elite specialization, in this case the Reaper, to make that far more competitive, as this build can be used in PvP, and far more damaging and deadly in the open world, as I will briefly demonstrate against some trash mobs later on, so we can really see how this build can really come together and act as a bridge between knowing nothing from the beginning, if you've just joined us from outside of the game watching part 1, to really branching out into doing your own thing at the end of this video. Now, let's head on over to the training area and we'll start our build talk. Right, so we're back in Lion's Arch Aerodrome Arena, and let's talk about our first build variant. Now, the first build variant from our Necromancer build in part 1 is our Necromancer Minion Bomber build. These are often quite popular builds among the Guild Wars 2 community because they're quite fun. The whole point of them is that our minions don't stay alive. So this is a much squishier build for both you, the player, and for your minions. We don't want them alive, which means we have less things buffing us and life stealing, things like that. The whole point of this build is to use this Grandmaster trait to its fullest potential. We want to Death Nova as much as anyone has ever Death Nova'd. Every time our minions die, we want that poison field to come up. We want that damage from the burst explosion. We want to summon more minions by killing more things in the open world, so we have more things to explode. It's just this big perpetual motion machine of you summoning a minion, it explodes, you summon another minion. We want them to all come out as quickly as possible and just deal damage that way. However, this means we've had to get rid of blood magic completely. You may go for two options here. You may go for curses if you are more condition damage inclined, but for the purposes of this build, I'm going to be demonstrating Spite. And the reason why I'm going to be demonstrating Spite is this trait right here, Reaper's Might. Reaper's Might gives us a stack of might every time we use skill 1 in our shroud. This will stack with the stack of vulnerability, so we are debuffing the enemy so they take damage, and we are buffing ourselves so we deal more damage. And this is just going to run on our auto attack as we play. So we use up all of our minions, and then we auto attack Shroud 1 until we're out of Shroud, and then hopefully some minions have recharged, and then we summon them back up, and they'll hopefully get spiked down quickly, and this is the cycle of the build. That's what we want our perpetual motion machine to look like. It's basically our rotation, though we're not even talking about any of the skills that we may have on our skill bar. The actual traits you choose to take are going to depend on your playstyle, so you can experiment a little bit with this build I'll run through what I've chosen here and why. Spiteful Renewal is super helpful. Gives us a little bit extra healing. You're usually going to have a few conditions on you as a player, and we're not fussed about keeping our Blood Fiend alive. So we can just pop it, trigger its healing skill, and it's now got an additional condition removal on top of its existing healing. You may also wish to switch out your healing minion for a regular healing skill and get even more out of this trait. Our second one is Awaken Pain. If we're going for a more power damage oriented build, like I am right now, this is the one to take. Gives us more power, less condi damage when we gain might. It's very, very simple. If you're not going for a power damage and are still taking the spike trait line, you may not wish to take this one. Take one of the other two. And finally, Close to Death. I actually think this one is great when running around the open world. You're going to come across a lot of elites and a lot of champions, and having half the time you're fighting them deal more damage. That's just a straight up marked up bonus. All your minions are going to be doing more damage to it. Their explosions are going to be doing more damage to it. Close to Death is just quite a helpful little skill to have on your bar. But if you want to experiment around, feel free. Most of this doesn't really matter. We just want this first one here. So let's take a quick little look at what this looks like in action. So here we are with the same golem setup as before. Now what I'm going to do here is show you exactly what you need to do to run your bomber build and what you're going to be doing while your minions are on cooldown. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to trigger up our Lich form. This gives us a major power boost as we use our skill 1, but what we really want here is this skill 4. And this is going to do is it's going to summon a whole bunch of unstable horrors that are going to run forward and pop, and that's going to trigger the Death Nova. And if you look up here, we've applied up to nearly 20 stacks of poison right there. That's quite a lot of poison. It's only short term, but it's quite a lot, and we still haven't exploded our own minions. And if we do this quick, that poison field would also apply weakness. Now, if you look down at our cooldowns for our elite, so those many minions that we send out, is on a really long cooldown. We're waiting over 2 minutes, and that is an eternity in combat. So when we are not with our minions, we are in Death Shroud, firing off our skill 1s and going through the appropriate rotation at the time. And that's it. It's very, very simple. We are spending most of our time keeping our minions up, using the appropriate minion skills when necessary, and just making sure that they pop, ready for you to fire out your Shroud 1 and obviously any other Shroud abilities that are relevant. Now, what you may have noticed, so if you look at our Shroud down here, I've purposely not used any abilities that are going to give us additional Shroud, but if we summon our minion and we pop it, we get a nice chunk of Shroud. So the advantage of this is even if we're on 0 Shroud and we summon our minion horde, we're going to build that Shroud up really quickly. So this brings us to our final variant. Well, second and final variant, because the minion master builds tend not to work well with a lot of elite specializations, with the exception of the Reaper, which can really take this Minion Master, Minion Bomber variant to a whole new level. And I'll just walk through very quickly how we're going to do that. First of all, we want the Reaper elite spec on our character. Second, we want the traits Augury of Death, which is going to give us a little bit of health back every time we use a shout, and we are going to be using a shout every time it comes off cooldown. That's just going to keep our health topped up and our minions active, as we'll go over in just a minute. Decimate defenses, which is going to increase our crit chance every time we hit someone with vulnerability, which we will be applying in Shroud thanks to Unyielding Blasts. And Reaper's Onslaught, which means we are going to be hitting more often while in Reaper form, because we'll be giving ourselves quickness. If you notice, our skill bar has changed ever so slightly again. I'll go over quickly what we've shifted over to. We've shifted over to Your Soul is Mine, though you can use any other healing ability you're comfortable with, but it's on a very short cooldown. Doesn't heal a whole lot, but the fact we are on a short cooldown with Your Soul is Mine means we can just keep casting it and not really have to think about a whole lot of stuff. Next, and this is the linchpin of this particular variant, is Rise. This means we can put out a lot of minions really quickly. Now, minions summoned with Rise are shambling horrors, and they take a little bit of damage for us, which means they're probably going to pop really quickly. So we want to get in close with our Shroud and start hitting these shouts as soon as possible so we can summon more minions with Rise. We can start getting those Death Novas off, and as discussed earlier, we can use our Lich form to cast Summon Madness. So we'll have a whole host of very weak, very disposable minions while we are hitting hard and fast in our Shroud. This means we can be quite effective at putting out quite a bit of spike damage very quickly with just minions popping off all over the place and you hitting hard in your Shroud. Keep in mind this is a lot more aimed towards a power DPS build than it is Condi, but it still does work if you're running a hybrid build as well. Using elite specs, you're going to want to think of moving into a set armor and stat block compared to the other roaming builds, which are more focused on leveling. By this point, you'll probably have a lot more tools at your disposal, as you will have been or will be traveling through an X pack to unlock the elite specialization. And here we are again, wailing on our golem to just demonstrate how these skills will all work together. Let's start with the shambling horrors that we're going to summon with Rise. If we know, we have two of them. In the open world, obviously we are going to be hit, and they are going to hit us back. And obviously the minions are dealing damage, which is going to be triggered by our own minion abilities up here. But that's not all. We have our Lich form and our Summoning Madness to summon our own little unstable horror horde. Those shambling horrors have just popped. Our unstable horrors are popping as well. We can pop our bone minions. And look, we got our shambling horrors back up. And that's all it is to it. Now, in PvP, this is quite useful because you're basically inundating your target with a whole bunch of minions very, very quickly. And if they don't know what they're doing, they're just going to panic, which is probably how I got used to running a Reaper so quickly in PvP. I don't recommend it for ranked PvP because most people know when they see this minion horde to just hit the squishy necromancer in the middle with their hammer, and you go down very quickly because this build has no defense against stuns. You cannot deal with stuns. I will show you a few alternatives on how to alleviate that in just a moment. So looking at our skill bar once again, we, as previously mentioned, have no stun breaks on this build whatsoever. It is the biggest weakness of this build because, well, we're very, very vulnerable to people hitting us quickly across the head, and we're stuck. So if you're struggling, because we really don't need to keep that minion horde up anymore, we can just exchange our Shadow Fiend for a stun break. Now we have a few options. We have Spectral Armor, which a lot of people like. It gives us protection, reduces the damage we take, lets us build that life force up very quickly. It's quite handy to have around. You're all weaklings is on a very short cooldown. It also gives us might. It gives our opponent weakness, and it's going to trigger that life siphon. So if you're running the Reaper variant, this is actually a really good shot. Alternatively, you can use Plague Signet, which transfers conditions from yourself onto your opponent and breaks stun. That's also very useful, but in terms of the open world, I actually do recommend You Are All Weaklings. You can keep that on your bar. I like to keep mine by my healing skill, and we have our little minion skills at the back here, so that we're just going to keep those three cycling. We're nice and protected by our stun break, and we can keep just spamming that shout whenever it comes off cooldown. So a quick demo in the open world of how Rise works when dealing with a whole bunch of targets. Now these are very weak targets. I'm only in Queensdale, but I wanted to do a little intro before activating the skill, and in most other places they will be very aggressive mobs that will just start beating me up before I even start talking. So let's just show it very quickly how we're going to summon a whole bunch of minions. So I'm going to click Rise here, and we'll just see how many pop up. Look at them all. A whole bunch of them.
Take that.
And we're just going to let them go ham here. Look at them go. And there they go. So how does this fare against open world mobs? Let's do a quick little demo. Summon our minions.
Arise, my creation. Rise.
Rise. Summon our minion horde. And as we're killing those open world mobs, we're actually summoning more jagged horrors because of our Death Nova here. Watch. Have another minion added to our horde. Which means as we're running about, we are just having this ever-growing horde that we aren't really too fussed if they pop. We get down here, just handle this mob. So as you can see, even without the extra minions, we still have a substantial following here, and obviously they're not going to live long, but we don't want them to. It's completely fine. so we can get to know a couple of our new Necromancer Reaper abilities as we traverse the open world, and this is a lot more suited for dealing with the dangers of X-Packs as well. And there we have it. I just want to take a moment to say thank you for watching and following me on this little journey. If you have followed me from part 1, we've built up a little build that helps you be survivable with not only minions but with your shroud in the open world, and this video has hopefully taught you to be a little bit more aggressive in later content where you might be spiked down a lot quicker with your minions, and really to use that to your advantage. If you found this build video helpful, or both of these build videos helpful, please let me know in the comments below. Maybe leave me a like. And if you're feeling very generous, you could hit that little subscribe button, as I am a growing channel and can use all the help I can get. But if you don't feel like doing any of that, then I simply just wish you a nice day. Have a good one.